send y'all spec. And hits that me, that's facts. I'm still coming for a play. When I hear something, then shut up, 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 shut up.
Hey kid, you know about tempo?
No.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Sorry.
Okay.
Kid, go inside.
I get, sure.
Shit, now I feel bad. You wanna get a coffee? So yeah, that's tempo. You weren't, wow, okay, weren't paying attention at all, huh?
Sorry, look at this new Final Fantasy spoiler.
10,000. That's a lot of damage.
It's a ton of damage.
Alright, anyway. No. Okay, sit down.
10,000
It's about time you learned about tempo. Now, Wikimagic defines tempo as...
Can you make your own video, please, and stop relying on you just reading, like, Magic Wiki articles?
Fine, damn. I could do that. Tempo is how fast you intend on playing the game. Are you going to be the Chad quarterback that is an aggro deck, peaking early and peaking hard with the breakneck speed of this video? Or do you want to be the mid-range stoners that wait till they get around middle age and then peak heavy and peak hard? And I'm not talking about social status. Or you could always be the slow and steady control decks, full of all the wisdom and tools needed to handle any situation, trying your best to not think of the early years in the war, followed by years of alcohol abuse and flashbacks.
Ooh, yeah, they all sound great. Could I maybe not do any of those, please?
Okay, yeah, fine, mister. Do you want to be the group hug player?
No, I guess. No, sorry.
Your deck will fit into one of these tempos: aggro, mid-range, or control. Like any good game, Magic draws inspiration from the greats. The great here being rock, paper, scissors. The three tempos are like me, my brother, and my cousin fighting for Italian beef. We're all gonna get some, but we're not gonna all leave unscathed.
Okay, so is that where the bruise on your neck came from?
Yeah. Yes, it is. There's a chain here. Aggro decks are strong versus control decks. Control decks are strong versus mid-range decks, and mid-range decks are good versus aggro decks. Now, this isn't always true. Of course, an aggro deck can go out back and old yeller a mid-range deck, but most of the time in that matchup, mid-range has its thumb on the scale. This diagram is great at showing the rock, paper, scissors aspect of Magic, but I did a slight adjustment by adding these arrows above that pretty much just mean add cards to deal with. For example, your aggro deck is naturally going to be weak against mid-range decks, so running some cards that can deal with mid-range decks like Fell the Mighty to board wipe large mid-range creature threats seems really good. At the same time, that mid-range deck is naturally weak against control, so it may want to run cards like Gaia's Herald to prevent counter magic from controlling the deck. On top of all this, the control deck might run something like Ghostly Prison to prevent the aggro deck from absolutely stomping it out. The reverse of this is equally as important though. If you're in the control deck, running cards to stop mid-range like Fell the Mighty isn't the best idea, as your deck is already naturally strong versus mid-range. On that same note, if your aggro deck is running something like Gaia's Herald, it won't really do much, as counterspells can only target one thing, and if you're an aggro, you're going to be outputting a ton of creatures, so it's not really needed.
Oh, okay, so in my Lathril Golgari Elves deck, I probably shouldn't run Vexing Bauble to stop, like, Omniscience and, like, infinite spells and stuff for free?
Yeah, you're getting it. Here you go. You're getting Italian beef sandwich.
There's no beef on here.
Anyway, another point I'd like to make about tempo has to deal with mana ramp, removal, draw, and board interactions, or as I like to call it, Mr. DB. There's a ton of videos out there talking about deck building template this, deck building template that. It's easy to think some of these basics like mana ramp removal, draw, and board interaction are set in stone, but I assure you this is no Sword of Arthur, and I know Arthur. Or in other words, these rules are not in fact set in stone. For instance, your aggro deck is going to be playing a lot of low CMC spells, which means you won't need very much what in the deck?
Ramp?
Exactly. You won't need that much ramp because your spells don't cost that much. On the same note, if you're playing so many low CMC spells in that aggro deck, you won't have very many cards in hand, so maybe running more...
Yeah, card draw to keep my hand full.
Yes, sir. Here's your beef.
Thanks.
This can be applied to all tempos. That control deck doesn't need to run much ramp, as it doesn't get to the late game through acceleration, but through controlling the game until that point, saving us room in the deck for more card draw and removal, while mid-range decks love having all the basics in abundance, with plenty of card draw, plenty of removal to deal with aggro decks, along with ramp and board presence to help get their game plan in motion earlier. Knowing which basics your deck requires more than others is super important, and tempo is the key to that. So, are you feeling better about tempo? Great! Now, understanding your own tempo is super important, but knowing each deck at the table's tempo is equally, if not more important. This is the reason my cousin, the Italian beefeater I was talking about earlier, it's why he wins so many games of Magic. He knows when spells matter the most, both for him and opponents. He also showed me why bounce spells like Unsummon are so strong, as they not only provide end-turn removal at instant speed, but also require the opponent to spend their mana again next turn if they wanted the creature bad enough. A lot of the time, that sets them back a whole turn for 1 blue mana. And while we're talking about tempo, and how the early game can quickly turn into the mid, and the mid into the late, setting a player behind a turn is incredibly strong. He always runs a small removal package with like 2 counter spells, but his decks feel incredibly controlling because he uses his spells at the best possible time, utilizing the tempo of the game. When someone would normally remove a huge threat on board like Blightsteel, exile it right away, my cousin would know that he is the control deck at the table, which is not only strong against the mid-range deck that just played the Blightsteel, but also makes the Blightsteel player way less likely to swing at him because he's piloting the control deck, which is more likely to have a piece of removal. My cousin utilizes this in builds running small removal packages with like only 2 counter spells because just playing his style of deck, a control, slow-paced deck, just naturally lends itself to optimal plays and other players approaching you with caution. I guess what I'm really trying to say is use your deck's tempo to know who your natural enemies and allies over the course of the game are going to be, and act accordingly. If you're in aggro, the mid-range deck is going to be your biggest enemy, while the mid-range deck has to worry about control. If you take the focus of the control deck off the mid-range deck by targeting it for no reason, not only are you being targeted by the control deck now, but also the mid-range deck doesn't need to worry about the control deck and can focus on you for the time being. You don't want to make an enemy out of quote-unquote allies. Know your tempo and what points in the game your deck is the strongest, what decks it's going to be weak against, what decks it's going to be strong against, and act accordingly. I hope this made any bit of sense. It probably didn't, but maybe you'll walk away with something new, or, maybe not. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff. Maybe check out the rest of the channel if you didn't enjoy it. I might have some other stuff you'll like. If you want to show some additional support like the people on screen, check out the Patreon. It starts as low as $1. And if you're considering ordering any cards in the future, please consider using my TCGPlayer affiliate link. It helps me out a ton. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.